Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're putting on our political analyst hats to unpack an event that has literally shaken the globe, the 103-day Iran war. Look, we're talking about a conflict that triggered massive global economic shockwaves, completely disrupted oil supplies, and led to some pretty wild competing claims of absolute victory from world leaders. But who actually won? To figure that out, we have to look right past the political grandstanding and audit the cold, hard facts on the ground.
Okay, let's quickly look at the agenda. We're cutting through the spin, grading the US and Israeli war goals, examining Iran's post-war reality, and finally looking at a brand new global power paradigm.
Section 1. Cutting through the spin. Rhetoric versus global reality. If we're really going to understand what happened here, we have to separate political theater from undeniable facts. On one hand, you had political leaders rushing to the microphones declaring, "We won, we defeated them." But the global reality experienced by everyday people? Drastically different. Iran shut off a fifth of the world's oil and gas supply. The economic shockwaves were instantaneous. We were left with the highest gas prices in 4 years and massive lines for fuel stretching from Pakistan to Cambodia. It's just a stark reminder that in the fog of war, rhetoric rarely matches reality. Moving to Section 2, grading U.S. war goals. Did America actually achieve its objectives?
So why did the United States even enter into this massive, open-ended conflict? The official balance sheet shows 3 primary objectives: end Iran's nuclear program forever, completely destroy their missile capabilities, and execute a regime change strategy, often called the Venezuela option. But despite all the money spent and the aggressive rhetoric, the U.S. failed to achieve all 3 of these aims. It's a clean sweep of failures. Let's break down exactly why, starting with the nuclear program.
Now, what's absolutely crucial to understand here is the fine print. This isn't some leaked intelligence estimate. This is Article 9 directly from the U.S.-Iran peace agreement. The initial goal was to completely obliterate the nuclear program, right? But the official treaty, literally signed by the U.S. president, explicitly states that Iran will maintain the current status quo of its nuclear program. So, far from destroying it, the U.S. formally endorsed the survival of the very program they went to war to erase. Okay, next up. The missile program. For years, the mainstream DC position was 0 missiles for Iran. And at the start of this 103-day war, the promise was to basically raze Iran's missile industry to the ground. But get this. Listen to this stunning post-war reversal from the president himself, stating on the record that it's a little bit unfair for them not to have some. I mean, talk about an incredible shift, going from demanding absolute disarmament to publicly admitting that a sovereign nation actually needs tools for its own defense. That means goal number 2 definitively failed. And the failure of that third goal, the Venezuela option, is equally stark. The U.S. wanted to topple Iran's leadership and turn it into a compliant state. Instead, Article 10 of the peace agreement immediately lifted U.S. sanctions on the export of Iranian crude oil. Just think about that. That single provision hands Iran an expected $60 billion in revenue annually. The U.S. essentially stopped fighting and offered up a massive payout for absolutely nothing in return. As the source material points out, America didn't Venezuela Iran. Iran Venezuela'd America. Section 3, assessing Israel's strategic objectives. Behind the war agenda. Let's keep our analyst hats on and audit the 3 main motivations that brought Israel into this joint strike. Their goals were to topple Iran's government, occupy southern Lebanon under the cover of the broader conflict, and internally boost the prime minister's popularity to save him from ongoing corruption trials. The result here? Highly mixed. They suffered 2 massive strategic failures alongside 1 deeply controversial ongoing military success. The crucial point is how that ultimate goal of regime change completely failed. The Israeli prime minister was really hoping that full regime change in Iran would set off this chain of dominoes, totally transforming the Middle East. The actual result? The Iranian government proved it could survive a direct attack from a superpower. Their leadership is arguably more secure now than ever. Plus, with the U.S. president now publicly calling Iranian leadership rational and smart, Israel has likely lost any ability to convince the U.S. to attempt this kind of war ever again. Now, Israel's singular ongoing military success is their occupation in southern Lebanon. Using the war as cover, Israel moved in to create what they're calling a security zone, stretching all the way up to the Litani River. To give you a sense of scale, this territory is twice the size of Gaza. It's huge. But here is the massive geopolitical catch. Article 1 of the US-Iran Treaty explicitly demands the termination of military operations, and it specifically mentions Lebanon 3 times. So this land grab directly conflicts with the very peace deal their biggest ally just signed. It's a severe diplomatic fracture.
And what about that internal political goal of saving the prime minister from his trial? Well, the domestic polling data is stark. A full 52% of Israelis surveyed believe the prime minister's conduct actively harmed their national interests. Another 43% believe Israel outright lost the war. So rather than cementing this legacy as a victorious wartime leader, the political blowback has been incredibly severe. We can mark this internal goal as a distinct failure.
Section 4. Iran's post-war reality. The victor's balance sheet.
So how did the primary target of this massive joint military attack actually fare when the dust settled? Their goals were to extract money, to rebuild their crippled economy, assert control over the Strait of Hormuz, and establish strategic deterrence over the United States. And they succeeded on all 3 fronts. By surviving the onslaught and imposing intense economic pain globally, Iran definitively positioned itself as the strategic victor of this 103-day conflict.
Just look at this number. Up to $100 billion. Under Article 11 of the agreement, the U.S. committed to making fully available the restricted and frozen funds of the Islamic Republic of Iran held in foreign banks. When you combine this incredible financial windfall with the $60 billion a year from lifted oil sanctions, it is clear Iran successfully extracted massive financial concessions simply by outlasting the attack. Then we have the Strait of Hormuz, which is a waterway responsible for a fifth of the world's oil supply. Before the war, completely open. During the war, Iran proved they could shut it down entirely. And now? Well, Article 5 states that Iran will help to find the future administration and maritime services in the strait. That is diplomatic language that effectively grants Iran administrative control and the right to collect transit fees. They successfully turned a vital international waterway into a toll booth under their own authority.
But perhaps their most significant long-term objective was establishing strategic deterrence. Look, after 20 years of living under the constant threat of American military intervention, Iran finally proved a point. By weathering the storm, inflicting heavy economic damage through the oil shock, and politically embarrassing the U.S., they imposed a cost so steep that any future American president will think twice before ever attacking again. The risk is simply no longer worth the reward.
Section 5. A new global power paradigm. How the world changed in 103 days. When we pull back and synthesize all 3 of these scorecards, we can cleanly list 5 undeniable, concrete geopolitical realities that emerged from this conflict. 1. Official U.S. diplomatic acceptance of Iran's missile and nuclear status quo. 2. The total death of Israel's long-held dream of Middle Eastern regime change. 3. A massive, ongoing Israeli occupation in southern Lebanon that defies U.S. treaties. 4. De facto Iranian administrative control over the Strait of Hormuz. And 5. Iran establishing permanent strategic deterrence over the American military. Make no mistake, the old Middle East is gone.
The ripple effects of these 103 days are going to be felt for generations. With American deterrence fractured and the map of the Middle East fundamentally altered, we really have to ask ourselves, how will these massive second and third order consequences reshape the global alliances of tomorrow? Who steps into the power vacuums left behind? And what is the true lasting cost of this war on world power? Think about that as you process this new reality. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the spin.